Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Translationborne, the show where we're taking a look at the translation of Bloodborne. Before we get started in earnest, I'd like to open up my inventory and just quickly demonstrate that I've purchased all of the weapons that are available to this point, and that actually includes the left-handed weapons as well, even though that screen only showed the right-handed ones. Of course, we've seen all of those weapons before, so I didn't mind buying them off camera. This next set is new though, so I'm going to examine it right here. Gascoigne's Cap. Hunter attire worn by Father Gascoigne. Similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, only these are tainted by a pungent beastly stench that eats away at Gascoigne. Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. So there's actually a slightly different attribution for Father Gascoigne in the Japanese than there is in the English. But before I get to that particular point, I'd like to read the description for the chest piece in this set, because it's a little different. Gascoigne's Garb. Hunter attire worn by Father Gascoigne. The dingy scarf is a holy shawl and symbol of the healing church, from which Gascoigne would eventually part ways. Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. Alright. Let me get back to what I was saying before about the title or attribution for Father Gascoigne. First, notice the initial part of the name of the gear. It doesn't change even when I switch items. This is the part of the set that really identifies who or what it belongs to. Right now I'm looking at the gloves, and a direct translation of this item name might be something like Father's or Priest's Hunting Gloves. In the official English version, this item name is actually Gascoigne's Gloves, and in this particular case, now that I've switched, it's Gascoigne's Trousers. So the Japanese version refers more to the profession, while the English version refers more to the character himself. Now look at that first line. Literally, this means something like, Old Hunter Gascoigne. And that's an important bit of information because old hunters play a big role in this game. Yet in the first line of the official translation, he's referred to only as Father Gascoigne. So, why would this information get left out? Well, I suspect this is another example of the consequences of different translation choices along the way. Perhaps due to character limitations, or perhaps due to some other reason, they decided to call this Gascoigne set rather than the Priest's Hunting set. But they still had that last set of lines to think about. The ones that read, Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. So in order for those lines to make sense, they really need a reference to Father Gascoigne somewhere in that set description. That means that rather than referring to him as Old Hunter Gascoigne, they instead decided to refer to him as Father Gascoigne. And of course, something else that it's important to note is that the official English version of the game does provide the information that Father Gascoigne was an old hunter. You can actually summon him at an earlier point in the game where it directly calls him Old Hunter Father Gascoigne. Ultimately, I think this is one of those cases similar to the red messenger ribbon I talked about at the end of the last episode, where all of the information is actually presented to you, it's just given to you in a different order, in a slightly different context. While we're on the subject of Father Gascoigne's attire though, there were a couple more things I wanted to point out. First, there's the second set of lines in most of the items in the set. They read, similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, only these are tainted by a pungent beastly stench that eats away at Gascoigne. A more literal translation of these lines might come out to something like, similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, but a scent clings to these that would eat away at Gascoigne until he finally transformed into a terrifying beast. And I think it's an interesting choice not to spell out the transformation of Father Gascoigne, but merely to imply it. Rather than talk about a scent that ate away at and finally transformed Father Gascoigne, it references merely a pungent beastly stench. And this is something that I think is in line with the translation choices we've seen up to this point. There's something of a tendency in the official translation to be a little bit vague in the way that it words things. But before we get on to another topic entirely, I did want to note that one thing I think works really well in English, better than in the Japanese really, is the way that Father Gascoigne is used as a way to refer to him both as a priest and also as the father of the characters that we've met to this point, like the little girl whose house is right here. In Japanese, it's essentially just the word for priest that you see. And yes, this message here means there's no response. I specifically wanted to come and show this on video because I didn't get a chance to do it in the last one. So with that out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit more about a couple things in relation to this red jeweled brooch. Not about its translation per se, but about something that you can do with it. Right here, I'm going to smash it and get a different item out of it. And of course, since this is a new item, it also has a new description that I'd like to read. But while I'm doing that, try to also keep in mind the action itself that I needed to perform in order to receive this item. Okay, Red Blood Gem. A blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Droplet blood gems are special gems that adapt to various weapons and shapes. Created from a bright red brooch, this blood gem strengthens the effect of rallying, a quintessential hunter's skill. Rallying symbolizes the battle-worn hunter who is often the only thing standing after a bloodbath. So once again, I'd like to start by going back and talking about the action that gave us this item. When you select Use on the red jeweled brooch from the item menu, your character smashes it open to get at the blood gem inside. And you may be thinking, what does this have to do with translation? But I would argue that it helps to set a tone that the translation should really aim to replicate. It lets you know that this is the kind of world where you can casually destroy a precious family keepsake for your own selfish gain. It's also another indication of the ruthlessness associated with hunters. And it's just this kind of contextual information that can inform decisions in localization, such as when they changed the "you hunted" message into the "prey slaughtered" message after you beat a boss. So even non-textual information can be very important when you're translating something like a video game. Having said that though, I would like to actually get to the textual description of the red blood gem. And the thing I'd really like to focus on here is the concept of rallying. And while this isn't the first item we've seen make reference to that system, it is the one that highlights it pretty prominently, with the final line being a quintessential hunter skill. Rallying symbolizes the battle-worn hunter who is often the only thing standing after a bloodbath. So, in case you couldn't tell, rallying is a reference to the system where if you attack an enemy after you've taken some damage, you regain some of your HP. And on the one hand, I think this is a great translation. It matches the setting beautifully. A hunter may take some damage, but then rally and come out on top. It also works well with the idea of hunters having a high degree of fortitude. On the other hand, though, you have to consider that the Japanese term that's being translated here is literally regain. It even borrows the English pronunciation, regain, in Japanese. And I feel like a more literal translation of regain might actually be a little bit clearer in terms of gameplay. And for a system as important to Bloodborne as this one is, I feel like clarity is a pretty big priority. In a way, this is the opposite version of what I was talking about when I brought up the white medicinal tablets being translated as antidote. You have to balance being true to the world while also letting the player know exactly what your systems are and how they work. It's a difficult thing to get right, and in terms of the rally system, it leaves me feeling a bit torn. But I think that's enough discussion on that topic for now. Let's talk again with the imposter Iosefka.
Oh, hello, you made it. Find any survivors? Or only beasts? Tell anyone who's human about Iosefka's clinic. I will take proper care of them. They're in your hands, and soon, mine.
Okay. Anything else?
If you find anyone who's still human, send them straight to Iosefka's clinic. You can assure them there's no place safer. Please, do me this service.
So there was one new dialogue there, and it included a number of interesting translation choices. In fact, it featured so many that I'm going to try something new. To give you a better idea of what's going on in each line, I'm going to put the text of the official translation on the screen while I read out a more literal version. So here goes. Oh, you're safe. So, how did you make out? Was there anyone out there who wasn't a beast? If so, please tell them about Iosefka's clinic. Then they'll become one of my precious patients. Please, do me this service. So, most of these changes are pretty standard. Changing the first line from, oh, you're safe, to, oh, hello, you made it, isn't that much of a change. You get a greeting tinged with a certain amount of surprise and a remark on your safety. But I did want to call attention to the last couple lines in particular. First, the second to last line, which I have more literally as, then they'll become one of my precious patients, I think sounds considerably better as, I will take proper care of them. Not only does it convey the idea of a doctor giving special attention to the people you send to her, but it also has some potentially sinister overtones. something that fits the actual situation very well. This is arguably taken even one step further in the final line, where the literal version is something like, "Please do me this service," and the official version is, "They're in your hands and soon mine." Though I should note that in the original Japanese, this is the same ending line she's given us in pretty much every dialogue, "Yoroshiku nagai ne." So there's a bit of a change going on here, but I think it's perfectly in line with the idea that Bloodborne's established of people not being quite what they seem. But now for that shield we picked up. Wooden shield. A crude wooden shield used by the masses who have arisen to join the hunt. Hunters do not normally employ shields, ineffectual against the strength of the beasts as they tend to be. Shields are nice, but not if they engender passivity. So most of that translation is pretty straightforward. But the final line of it features a pretty interesting translation choice. Literally, the Japanese there would translate to something like, "Shields are good, but they should never lead to overconfidence." Or alternatively, "Shields are good, but don't put too much confidence in them." This is in contrast to the official version, which is, "Shields are nice, but not if they engender passivity." Clearly then, something more than just literal translation is going on here. And there are a number of reasons this could be the case. One of those reasons, in fact, gets back to something I was talking about earlier. That is, the idea of how different aspects of the game, including the visuals or the gameplay, can influence a translation. Because we've actually seen enemies wield that shield that I picked up. And all things considered, they're pretty passive. Actually, let's take a quick look at some other footage that I have of me engaging with one of those shield enemies. They do attack, but the time in between their attacks, they just kind of passively walk around hiding behind their shields. And as you can see, the time between their attacks is pretty long too. Given this context, I think that it makes a little bit more sense that the translation team would end up choosing a word like passivity to represent what happens if you rely too much on your shield. And that brings me to another reason that they may have decided to go with a less than literal translation of that line, which is that they need to inform players how to play this particular game. Bloodborne's the fourth game in a line of similar games developed by the same company. And in all three of those previous games, shields were a major part of gameplay, at least for most players. Bloodborne, on the other hand, is most decidedly not about shields. The game doesn't even give you one until you've killed at least one boss. Then after you pick it up, if you read the description, you'll see it says, "Hunters do not normally employ shields, ineffectual against the strength of the beasts as they tend to be." And so for the last line of the description to double down on that idea, that you shouldn't be using shields, makes perfect sense. And if part of the idea of this item description is to help players adjust to how they're supposed to play this game, warning that shields engender passivity might help give players the idea that you don't want to be passive at all. When you play this game, you want to be aggressive. You want to actively go out and deal with the beasts that come rushing at you all the time. So overall, I think this is a great translation choice. It's both in line with the spirit and the themes of Bloodborne, and helps teach players how to best play this game. Also, this is another case where I'm just personally a huge fan of the new wording. I think it sounds great. And since that covers pretty much everything that directly relates to translation in this episode, I thought I'd spend this last minute or so going over some things in relation to the series itself. First of all, let me just apologize for the delay in releasing this episode. I prefer to come out with an episode in the main series once every 2 weeks, and this one, it's been at least a month since the last actual video I put up, so I'm sorry about that. If you're curious as to why, it was because I had to capture new footage, and then I got sick for a while, so my voice sounded weird and I didn't want to record, but everything's back to normal now, and hopefully I won't have another delay like that again. As you may have noticed, I'm also trying out some new techniques in this video. I have some new equipment that I'm going to be getting in soon, so hopefully I can improve some of the audio quality, for instance. And I've also tried to experiment with some different episode lengths, this time going a little bit shorter than the ones that I had before. As a result, I'm especially interested to hear any comments or suggestions that you may have for me in regards to this video series as I continue to try and improve it. So next time we're going to pick up right from here. Until then, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for me, please do get in touch. Thank you all for watching.